Welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio, where we bring you conversations with the top business minds on Long Island and around the nation every week. Featuring expert consultants and small business owners who have found success but are also willing to share their top tips, failures, and give gritty, matter-of-fact advice based on their firsthand experience. Now, let's get down to business on Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello and welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the Nassau Community College Foundation. My name is Ray Schwetz, AVP of Business Banking at Jovia Financial Credit Union, along with Denisha Boston Hill, CEO, keeper of the brand, marketing and digital agency.
We're focused on being the premier resource for business and entrepreneurship. We bring you weekly business advice, tips, tools, and services that help you grow your business. Plus, we interview the top business leaders in the industry.
And helping provide us with business empowerment today is an entrepreneur, a 3-decade radio announcer and program director, marketer, and author, Jim Rafferty. He's the author of the acclaimed Leader by Accident. Jim, welcome to the show today.
Thanks so much. Pleasure to be here, guys.
We're really excited to have you. Your story is extremely powerful, and I want to just jump right into it, if it's okay with you.
Sure. Leader by Accident really has its roots in a tragedy locally here, which is just north of Baltimore, Maryland, where a local attorney and his wife and their 2 younger sons were all shot to death by their oldest son, who was then 15 years old. And as horrible as that sounds, I assure you it was worse. I enter that story because John, the father, was the scoutmaster of the Boy Scout troop that our son belonged to at the time. All 3 sons were members of the troop. And a couple of days later, I was the new scoutmaster of the troop, which was somewhat surprising because I had been a Boy Scout for all of about 2 weeks as a kid. I really didn't like it. I was not an outdoorsman or a camper or, in possession of any scouting skills or any of the kinds of things that you want in your scoutmaster. And suddenly at the helm in this awful moment, for an organization that we really didn't know whether, the troop would survive or not. So it was an interesting time.
No, I'll bet. And
Absolutely.
I don't envy you. I mean, I made it to tenderfoot. That's as far as I got.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and that job, if you've been in scouts at all, that scoutmaster job is a pretty demanding volunteer role under the best of circumstances. And clearly this was anything but the best of circumstances. So it was really a long series over 5 years of some great leadership lessons for me.
No.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And tragedy. I mean, I hear a lot of, just different stories that scoutmasters go through, but I can't imagine during your circumstance what you were feeling during that time and the emotions that this was evoking in you.
It was, kind of indescribable, really, the emotion, but also on the plus side, the resilience of those young men and the way they hung in there and were there for each other, the way that other parents in the troop stepped up and did more and, really ensured not only the survival of the troop, but a year later we were thriving. We were larger in numbers. We were, busier, doing more activities, and really it was a pretty amazing time.
And this is a parallel to, of course, what's going on now. I mean, pivot is the word of the day with everyone. How did you adapt and recover from such a tragic and awful situation?
I think one of the keys I've already mentioned, and that was to reach out and ask for help, right? And leaders can't be afraid to do that. And the other was I was very upfront with the parents. I mean, one of my first acts was to send an email to all hands and just say, look, I have no experience at this. I'm a little puzzled as to why I'm the guy now wearing this shirt, but here it is, and I need your help, and I don't have the answers. And people stepped up and they did help. And, I think A, not being afraid to ask for help, and B, admitting that you don't have the answers are 2 critical qualities in leadership.
Oh.
Now, how did this lead you to, from scout leader to entrepreneur?
Yeah, and that really is the gist of the book. I think if it was just the scouting thing that had happened, it's an interesting story. But a few years later, really in between my 4th and 5th year as scoutmaster, I pretty suddenly lost my job that I'd held for almost 21 years to that point as the marketing manager and sales manager for a fairly sizable home improvement company. And I started to look for another job because honestly, it had never crossed my mind to do anything other than have somebody hand me a paycheck and provide my health care and the whole safety net that goes with that. The flaw in that strategy, as it turned out, is that people were not lined up around the block, believe it or not, to hire a 51-year-old self-taught marketer. So, I like to say I sent a whole bunch of resumes all over the place, and then I buried a few more in the backyard and got pretty much the same result. And so, I can laugh about it now, right? But it was a very difficult time. Our son, the Boy Scout, was now a year away from college. I was the main breadwinner and provider of healthcare, and we really didn't know what was next. And over the course of a few weeks, a few people from random parts of my life reached out and said, hey, could you take a look at my website? Could you take a look at this proposal that a vendor gave us to redo our company's website? Could you come in and talk about our marketing? And I thought, wow, somebody's trying to show me a path here. And so I wound up hanging out my shingle as a marketing consultant. That was 9.5 years ago. And however you care to measure success, whether, doing work you love or the money in the bank account or schedule flexibility and freedom, this has checked all the boxes. I absolutely love what I do. But really the point of Leader by Accident is that if not for that first step out of my comfort zone into the Scoutmaster role and the experiences that I had over those few years, I never would have had the guts to take that second step out of my comfort zone and become an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And that's generally what happens with most entrepreneurs. There's some, incident in their life that leads them on this, on this journey that's really, reaching out and stepping out on fear, because the word entrepreneur for many decades was a faux pas. It was like the jack of all trades. What are you really great at?
Sure. Yeah. And, I love the jack of all trades part of my work. And this job has kind of built itself around me where, as you mentioned at the beginning, I'm a former radio announcer, and now some voiceover work is part of what I do. And that's great, and, every day is different. Every client is different. And I love that. And you're absolutely right that, there are people out there who I think are just wired from birth to be serial entrepreneurs, and they love walking out there on the knife's edge and taking those risks. And I am not one of those people. I wasn't then, and I'm not now. But I did it because I had this other experience with scouting, and it was life-changing. Both were life-changing.
All right. Now, how do you know where to start? What are the actionable steps?
I think the actionable steps is, first of all, to recognize when you're stuck. And, the final point I make really in the book is don't be like me, right? Don't wait for the tragedy to happen to force you into stepping up into a leadership role, whether it's a volunteer role or somewhere else. Don't wait to get kicked out of your job to do what you really love to do, because, time slips by and you don't get it back. So much good things can happen. And that doesn't mean we need to live outside our comfort zones. I mean, to this day, there's no bigger homebody creature of routine than I am. But we have to challenge ourselves once in a while where, nothing changes. I like to quote there's a preacher somewhere sometime who said, God loves you just the way you are, and he loves you too much to let you stay that way. We need to grow. We need to change. And to do that, we have to challenge ourselves and do the things that make us uncomfortable sometimes.
Absolutely. And so, Jim, in your words, what is leadership to you, and what isn't it?
Okay, let's start with the second one, because the scouting program, what isn't leadership? This was a lesson I saw that had to be learned firsthand time and time again, where one of our young men would get promoted within the troop and become, say, the patrol leader, the leader of his little group of 6 or 8. And he would think, well, I'm the patrol leader now, so that means I'm the boss and these peons have to do what I say. And they'd start, ruling like a king, and it wouldn't go so well, right? He'd either get ignored or ridiculed or whatever, and they'd come back to us in tears sometimes. And they had to learn the hard way that being the leader doesn't mean being the boss, and vice versa. That's part of it, but it's not the whole story. As to what leadership is, I mean, there's so many definitions. I've always loved the one, and I won't quote it directly. I won't get it right, but Eisenhower said something to the effect of leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because he wants to do it. And that's part of it. And really that goes back to the very first message to the parents of the scout troop, where it's not that I need you to step up. It's that the troop needs you to step up and take on more responsibilities, or, we may not be here next year. And that works.
You are listening to Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ray Schwetz, along with Denisha Boston Hill, and our guest today is Jim Rafferty, author of the acclaimed Leader by Accident. Now, Jim,
I can just hear, I love hearing your voice. It's the announcer. I think it's the announcer, all these radio, I call us radio geeks. We just love hearing that announcer voice. And,
why, thank you very much.
Yes. In your book, you cover the importance of communication and language in a healthy organization and culture. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. That's a prominent sub-theme in the book, and it grows out of really a few stories. I'll tell one sort of abbreviated right here, but basically comes back to a conversation I had with one of my scouts in the fall of his junior year of high school, when we were just, setting up chairs before a meeting or something mundane. And I asked him what he was thinking about college and what majors he was thinking about and all that. And we chit-chatted about that for a few minutes. And he said, "Mr. Rafferty, what do you think I should do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. What do you like to do?" And we talked a few minutes more, and I honestly forgot the conversation had ever happened, just small talk. Right? Well, a year and a half later, he sent me a thank you note upon the occasion of reaching Eagle Scout. Sent me a note to thank me for my leadership. But in that note, he recalled that conversation that I had forgotten. And he said that was the first time in his life. Now, mind you, he was probably 16 years old. That was the first time in his life that anyone had asked him what he wanted to do with his own life. And that was such a powerful lesson for me, that what I thought was small talk, throwaway question, chit chat, really was taken, much more seriously than I had intended. Fortunately, in a good way. But when we're leaders, it can work the other way too. And the problem with that, especially these days, is so much of our communication as business leaders now happens by typing, right? We're emailing and we're texting and we're IMing people. And it's so easy to lose the tone and the intent of not just what we wanted to say, but how we meant for it to be interpreted. And you run a real risk of alienating team members if that's not handled carefully. So really, the point of the book is the impact that the language we use can have on organizational culture. What a big part of organizational culture it is. And it's a very simple thing. We spend so much time and money and effort chasing this thing we call employee engagement, organizational culture, which really are two sides of the same coin, right? And, sometimes it just comes down to the way we speak to people.
Now, you mentioned an attitude of gratitude. That's also something that I think is very prominent and so necessary. It's something that I feel very, very strongly about, and I try to impart that on my children, especially now. Why, in your words, why is an attitude of gratitude so important?
Yeah, that was a regular theme in my messaging to the Scout troop, was that, it's important to be grateful for what we have, and that doing that doesn't necessarily happen organically, that we have to make it a habit to really look for the things that are good, because otherwise we tend to focus on the stuff that annoys us, right? I used to say to them, if we get in the shower and hot water comes out, we don't notice. If cold water comes out, somebody's going to hear about it, right? So that was a recurring theme for them and in my own life as well. But the reason I think it's even more important is, when I was delivering that message to the Scouts, that was more than a decade ago. In other words, long before we reached this current political and social media climate that we're in, of the shouting and the finger pointing and the name calling, and really the constant flood of negativity that meets our eyes and ears every day in what we consume. So I think it's more important than ever that we cultivate that sense of gratitude, but I also think it takes more work than it used to. And for me, it's a very simple thing. And I know some people do gratitude journaling, and that's fantastic. That has not been my thing. For me, it's very simple. Last thing I do every day before I close my eyes is come up with 3 things that day that I'm grateful for. And some days it is really hard to come up with 3 things. And other days it's hard to decide which 3 things, which in itself is a really, really useful exercise.
Now, Jim, what actually made you or inspired you to sit down and put your book to pen?
That is an amazing question. And I wish there were a simple answer. But, I think, and this is the point I make in the book, and when I speak to groups, we talk about getting out of our comfort zone frequently. And I think the part we miss a lot, because we're so busy, because our phones are chiming and dinging all day long and our inboxes are full, and right, is once we've stepped out of our comfort zone, we need to take a little time to reflect on what we've done, give ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back for trying, even if it didn't turn out the way we hoped. right? And to think about what went right, what went wrong. And the book grows out of really several years after both of these events, the stepping into the Scoutmaster job and then the becoming an entrepreneur, of reflecting on those. And it took a while to really understand how much the first one influenced the second one. So, another big theme in my book is to find the time for reflection, because we really learn things. And that's where the book came from, really, was in taking time to look back over what happened, to look back at becoming a consultant and, going downtown and filing the paperwork that established my company and thinking, my gosh, whatever gave me the guts to think I could do that? I'm glad I did, but that was so unlike me. And, the answer became clear when I took some time to think and reflect on it.
Thank you for sharing.
There are so many responsibilities as a leader, and as you mentioned, you are a jack of all trades. You are doing a lot of different work and wearing a lot of different hats. How do you balance all of that and then yet also have time for your family?
Well, at the moment, we are empty nesters, so kids are grown and gone. But if I look back over that time, the way I found time was just to make it happen, to be the Scoutmaster, to be the baseball coach, to be the soccer coach, to be involved. Your kids come with unlimited opportunities to step up and volunteer for stuff. And the fact that I did those things, and sometimes had to put work aside to do it. And I was fortunate to be in a job when I had my job that allowed a little bit of flexibility to be the coach, to do those things. That really made a big difference, I think, in the human beings that they became, to have parents who were involved, both myself and my wife. So, I don't know if it's a how you do it. It's really important that you find a way to do it and to be involved, and because there's no more important leadership job than parent.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you're definitely not one that seemed to be sitting on the sidelines as you're sharing your journey with your family. And so kudos to you for being involved, being community minded, and really taking a major part in your children's growth, especially these extracurricular activities take up all your time.
They do. It was hard to make the time sometimes, but I was always glad I had. There's no doubt about it.
What are the traits that you feel are the most important things for a leader to embody? I mean, I know you discussed some of it now. I'd like to kind of get a good idea, maybe what are the top 3 leadership qualities?
I think calmness or level-headedness or whatever really helps, even in the middle of a crisis like we had with the Scout troop, to be the calm voice in the room. I think the ability to admit that you don't have the answers necessarily, that you need help, is a big part of a leader, and to not get too obsessed with being the boss and what leadership means. Leadership means, putting your arms around a team in some way and getting them to produce better because they know you care about them. That really is the nut of it. The old saying goes, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And I think we just have to do that as leaders, whether it's in a business setting and a business setting or somewhere else. And again, when I speak to groups, I make this point. I don't care if you run a company with 200 people or if you're the new salesperson who started last week. Someone in your life at some point is looking to you for leadership, whether it's your kids, your spouse, where you take turns leading, ideally in a good relationship, or, even coworkers. I mean, we all have our moments when we have to lead, and it starts, I think, with, calmness and humility and being willing to admit that we don't have the answers.
Currently, my philosophy is even kill. And that's so when you say calmness, that's what I'm really hearing. Can you share with us, a time you had to be really even killed and focused, because not only everyone's watching, but, it's just the footsteps you had to take to move a process forward?
Yeah, I wish I could say I batted 1,000 on that, even as Scoutmaster, but I did not. I mean, the boys heard what I like to call my Scoutmaster voice more than once, but usually it was when something dangerous was happening, and they need to know that that's not acceptable. And yeah, so they got yelled at a few times, but that calmness, I mean, think about, young men that age and how much value there is in demonstrating that whatever just happened is that we can address this calmly, whatever it was. And I mean, there's no greater example than the tragedy of this family that was killed. And I don't want to say there was no emotion involved. There certainly was, but it was not panic. And I think that demonstrates a valuable lesson. And so many things happen on camping trips, that, when you're dealing with kids that age, with the patrol who showed up with frozen pizza on a camping weekend and, didn't seem to realize that we did not have either freezers or ovens in the campsite, that kind of thing. Well, you can panic or you figure out a way to make it work and get the others to share their food and all that. So, I mean, in hundreds of ways, especially through the Scoutmaster stuff, I think just the ability to keep a level head and, it doesn't mean you're not feeling that inside, but, you can't let other people you can't let other people see that you're panicking, even if you really are.
You are listening to Tower Talk Business Radio. Our guest today is Jim Rafferty, author of the acclaimed Leader by Accident. My name is Danisha Boston Hill, along with Ray Schwetz on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Obviously, you're very passionate about what you do. That comes across. So you must love what you do. What is it that you love most about what you're doing now?
I love my work. As I mentioned real briefly, the variety of it is really, really neat because in the marketing side of it, no two clients need the same thing. So everyone's a different puzzle to solve with different pieces. Every day is different. Some days it's a lot of writing, and some days it's tinkering with websites, and other days it's doing voiceover work and all. And I love the and part of my work. Yes, I'm a marketing consultant and I do voiceover work and I wrote a book and I speak to groups and, that kind of thing. I love that, for me, that's variety. Other people may love the routine of doing something, the same thing every day, and God bless them, but that's not me.
And what do you do to unwind? Because, we're talking about a lot of different things that, there's some intensity, even if you love what you do and you're hopping around from job to job and from hat to hat. What is it you do to unwind?
Sure. For some unknown reason, I enjoy golfing. I'm terrible at it, but I try to play once a week when the weather allows it around here. And, I do a lot of word puzzles and things like that. I walk and exercise, and I find that very therapeutic in terms of sort of clearing my head and getting my arms around whatever's going on at that moment. And also a little bit of everything.
Do you feel like any of the book can help you with the golf lessons or help us with the golf lessons?
Well, maybe the calmness part. I'm not a thrower of clubs or anything. I'm just not very good.
And what advice would you give, a scout leader or an entrepreneur that's out there listening? That I know you gave your top 3, but what advice would you like to share with them that's like one of your key takeaways?
Sure. Well, in the case of the scout leaders, I would first say thank you, because what you're doing is important. And I think, that those people who are leading in the scouting program and the scouting program in general are really important voices in the ears of our young men and women now, at a time in their life when they really need it. We are really, as parents, we've lost a lot of control over what our children consume, online and so forth. And we need other places to reinforce the lessons that we're trying to teach at home. So the first part of it is thanks for stepping up. The second part is you don't need to have all the answers. You can be the scout leader without having been a Boy Scout like I was. You can be the entrepreneur, without having experience at it like I did. Believe in yourself and challenge yourself and take that step out of your comfort zone.
So now that the book is out, what are kind of the next steps for you and your team?
Next steps really are spreading the word like we're doing now, which is great. And I starting to give some keynote speeches and speak to business groups and share this message of really the 3 prongs of it are the stepping out of the comfort zone, the language that we use as leaders, which we discussed also, and then this cultivating, really, I think is the right word, this sense of gratitude that helps us get through our business days and our lives, especially these days, because the last 2 years have been such a challenge and there's so much uncertainty. And, we look back November, 4.5 million people left their jobs. So people are deciding to leave their comfort zone in one way or another. The pandemic has forced us all out of our comfort zones in different ways. And the single most frequent piece of feedback I've had on the book, Leader by Accident, is, this is what I needed to hear right now. and that's great. I've had a couple of just neighbors. One read the book and then told me she went after the biggest contract she'd ever gone after at work and got it. And she says, now I have to step out of my comfort zone again and actually, fulfill the contract. And another one is a professor who, very unlike her, according to herself, reached out directly to the president of the university because she had a couple of ideas for leadership programs, wound up having lunch in the president's office the next day and came away with like 4 or 5 different possibilities for things out of that meeting. So, we've all heard before that we need to leave our comfort zones, but sometimes we need to be reminded of it. And I think the book is a little bit of a kick, a little bit of a prod to remind us that maybe that next thing is out there waiting for us.
I think we do need that. So thank you for giving that
I always
to
go
us.
back. I'm sorry to interrupt. The story I always like to tell, it's similar, but, Zig Ziglar, the sales trainer who was around forever and ever and ever, somebody said to him once, Zig, the trouble with that sales training of yours is it doesn't last. And he said, well, neither does showering. That's why we recommend doing it daily. Right? and I think that's the same thing with, being reminded that we do need to take a step out of our comfort zone and to make sure we are checking the right boxes as leaders in the way we're communicating with our team and those kinds of things.
Thank you very much. Well, what's the best way for us to contact you and for us to find the book?
Oh, thanks. You can go to leaderbyaccident.com, spelled just like it sounds. And you can buy the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any place where you buy books. Also through that website, leaderbyaccident.com. You can contact me there as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely look for it. Thank you very much for joining us, Jim. We'd like to thank our guest. He's the author of the acclaimed Leader by Accident, Lessons in Leadership, Loss, and Life. We really appreciate you sharing your incredible story and your insights, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My pleasure to be here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for being with us, Jim. I'd like to leave you with DB's philosophy. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moment of comfort, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Martin Luther King Jr.
I want to thank you for being with us. My name is Ray Schwetz, along with Denisha Boston Hill, your co-host and producers. This is an NCC Foundation production. Visit nccradio.org for more information. We're available on Odyssey, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and podcast on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. This has been Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the National Community College Foundation on the voice of National Community College, 90.3 WHPC.